Today we are celebrating the arrival of fall. Besides being cozy and beautiful and finally cool, fall is a really excellent time to work on your yard and garden. And because it's such an important time for wildlife who are either gearing up to migrate or gearing up for winter, fall is also a great time to make small or big changes to your outdoor spaces so you can better support the natural world. So I'm going to hand it over to Patti here in a second to talk about fall and the garden. And then I will come back afterwards and share some ways that you can actually help advance scientific research just by making observations from your yard or your neighborhood this fall. So I'll tell you more about why you might want to do that and show you how in a little bit. But first, here is Patti.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Anna, for introducing me and for helping me get all my slides together.
Of course.
I think Anna introduced it really well when we're talking about fall and why it's a great time to think about getting our gardens in shape for supporting wildlife. So long story short, it's a good time to be out there working in the garden. But a little bit about me and my history. I actually studied wildlife management in college, but I was also an artist all through my childhood. So I became a graphic designer and worked in that field for about 24 years before I got to do an early retirement and live my dream, which was kind of capitalize on the avid gardener and botanist part of myself. Being an outdoor lover, really got curious while I was in college about plant taxonomy and all the plants, beautiful plants I was seeing. So I started the native plant nursery. And then a couple years, well, about 6-7 years later, I decided that we were more about education than making money on plants. So that's what we decided to do with Botanical Belonging. Wanted to really share how you learn to identify plants and how you kind of just make yourself familiar with them. And a lot of what I learned was really by caring for them in gardens. And there is nothing like what you see in this picture, actually meeting a plant that you've admired for a long time in picture somewhere, and then to be next to it in its native habitat really made a big difference in understanding a lot about that plant and how it grows in gardens. So this is what really attracted me in the beginning, was the beauty of plants. And so here's just a small sampling of all the beautiful plants that are available to us. And then as I started adding these things to my gardens, I started noticing these awesome things happening all around me. So on the next slide, you can see that these gardens support insects, wildlife, and all of us know that the plight of the monarchs in our country, and that their populations are really declining because they've lost a lot of habitat. They're not the only insect that this is happening for, but lucky for us, this monarch and its charismatic beauty and even how cute the caterpillars are, and this one host plant, the milkweed, really made a difference in people wanting to support insects using native plants. So this really is what transformed my understanding of my garden and what it can add for wildlife, and how I can attract more wildlife to my garden for my own entertainment, really. Okay, so next slide, you can see Anna and I both said we're based in the central part of the U.S. So in Kansas, people think that there's really nothing here. It's just this flat landscape with just a lot of grass, right? It's not necessarily true. So you can see on this next slide that these prairies that we think of as grasslands are really full of a lot more than grass. In fact, the best prairies I've ever been in are incredibly diverse. You can't step anywhere without stepping on something that isn't grass, or at least it seems that way. Late in the summer, you start to see more grasses, but in this picture, this is likely taken maybe June, maybe July, probably June, based on what I'm seeing blooming there. But there's a lot in a grassland, in these prairie grasslands, that is not necessarily grass, including thousands and thousands of insects that use this diverse habitat as home, and the native bird species that really depend on grasslands. So next slide will tell us that there's only about 4% of that tall grass prairie left in our in its original habitat, from its original range. And those losses of habitat are really what has mounted to the declines in the insects that we're trying to support in these gardens. In fact, the Xerces Society indicates that about 28% of all North American bumblebees are facing some degree of extinction. And that's because their nests really depend on this undisturbed grassland habitat. And nearly all of our North American prairies have been lost to land conversion, and what's left is heavily fragmented, as our next slide will show. I hope you can kind of make out, this is actually where I live. This is a photo, GIS information from about 1940, I think, 1941. And you can see that that's pretty much just kind of bare, looks, because it's gray, looks pretty open, kind of like that first photo we saw of the tallgrass prairies, just nothing there. But the next one you can see, which was just a few years ago, look at all the trees, all the stuff, and the plants that aren't part of that grassland habitat that are now here. So this is what fragmentation does to these grasslands, is everywhere we put a fence, you can see there are little trees growing. And all the time I tell you, if you walk in a prairie, you will know that prairies are not the friendliest places for people. If they're not full of bugs, and they almost always are full of bugs, they're sunny, they're windy, they're rainy, stormy. They're not very easy places for people to be, especially in the middle of the summer. So people, when they build these houses, they want trees. So my house now has trees all around it, right? And it didn't have anything when before our house was built here. So that's part of what can happen in just 80 years in these prairie landscapes. They quickly become treed landscapes. So given that we are kind of taking up all of this space, it makes sense to me that gardens may be our answer, may be a way to give some of this space back. I have a lot of sun in spite of the trees that we've planted around our house. And so I can plant a great diversity of plants in my gardens, but really just knowing what to do with that and keeping it people friendly is kind of the point that I'm going to help you see today. So I love this place because not only is it habitat for me, but it's habitat for the wildlife around me. So let's move to the next slide and ask ourselves the big question: what is a native plant? And I've just picked this off of the internet as one way to define it. But native plants, I think, can be thought of in several different ways. There's a geographical area. There's also a historical aspect to it. But generally for me, I am defining it really as something that is not going to destroy the habitat where I'm placing it. Instead, it's going to encourage the kind of rebuilding of a habitat. And I'm going to really think about what was here before European settlement. Now, finding out that range part, the geographical part, this site, BONAP or BONAP, however you want to say it, Biota of North America program, is my favorite place to do some research about range. Has a lot of ways to use it. And on the next slide, you can see why it's kind of fun. This is the Echinacea genus, So I can look at a whole genus and find out where it occurs in the US. So echinacea are those purple cone flowers that we really like. There is one yellow purple cone flower called Echinacea paradoxa, and you can see its range is very limited. And mostly it's down in Missouri in the Ozarks is where I see it. But this is why I like it, is because I can pull up a genus and I can see down to county level what the range is, the known range of that plant. So there may be plants we haven't, or places we haven't seen it. Okay, so that's that, and beautiful flower. Sorry, we're skipping forward. Somebody else is running my slides, and that's good. But this kind of gives you, there's a way that you can look and find out what the colors on the maps are. There's a what do you call that?
A key.
Yeah, a key. Yeah, a color key that tells you what these mean. So anyway, you can kind of see that this purple cone flower, Echinacea purpurea, that we plant in our gardens, great one for gardens. In Kansas is pretty rare. It's been mostly introduced by us into these spaces. It's kind of a woodland edge species, not really that tall grass prairie species that we are used to seeing here. But not a bad one for gardens. Okay, so let's move on to wildflowers as opposed to native plants. And what does that mean? So some of these wildflower mixes contain a lot of things like zinnias, the one in the middle, right? That is, even though they say it's for hummingbirds and butterflies, and it will actually support all of those things with nectar. They're awesome. And pollen. These guys don't always have native species in them. So knowing kind of what some of those species are is helpful. So unless it's got something that's invasive, and that's where the BONAP can help you, because it does have noxious weed and invasive designations in there. I think you're fine if you're just in general wanting to do kind of a native mix or native look. Like, they're kind of messy though. So where you would get native plants though is I say, just do some research. Cultivars aren't usually something I will never sell cultivars if I can help it, only because I'm not sure why I need to mess with something that's already perfect, right? But the horticulture industry does a good job of helping us understand native plants and not native plants, but how native plants can work into gardens by starting with a native plant and selecting for traits that make it more garden friendly. Now, I've found though, in some cases, they've taken away something pretty that I really liked about a native plant. So cultivars are interesting. I think that having the native, for me, it feels better just because I know I'm putting something back into the environment that should be there. I do agree though that the horticulture industry is doing its best to make these used more. So I really like that about that, but on my end of it, I'm focusing on only doing the straight species here and I would love to focus even on local species here. Okay, so I think that's good. I think we've covered cultivar. There's a lot of information out there on a site called Grow Native, and that's from the Missouri Prairie Foundation. They do kind of help us distinguish about that. Not in most cases, the cultivars are still going to be okay, but sometimes the modifications to the flowers and the plants make them not as useful to our native insects. Okay. So diversity is really the key for providing habitat in our gardens. So I'm remembering that the prairie ecosystems are the most diverse ecosystems out there. They rival that rainforest kind of diversity. So everywhere we look, there are layers and layers and layers of things blooming, things creeping around and covering the ground. So I'm always looking for ways to fill gaps when I see them in gardens. So using different leaf colors, different leaf shapes really helps us get a very beautiful mix of textures and colors in a garden, as you're seeing here from one beautiful spring we had a few years ago. Okay, the next slide. Here are just some options, example of some of the diversities of flower types that are useful to different species. Just keeping in mind that most of the butterfly species are looking for nectar. Most of the bee species are actually collecting pollen and also using nectar and performing very, very specific tasks. But the difference in the shape and size of the flower is really important. And here are some of my favorite spring flowers. And I'll just run through these real quick because there's a lot. And these are combinations and things that go really well together. Use them in different ways. Spring is generally low growing, so we can go on to summer. Summer gets a little bit taller. We want lots of flowers in there, lots of insect activity. And here are a few species I like for that. Next one. Here's some more summer, lots going on in summer, and it lasts a long time. And here's some fall. Lots of things you can incorporate even this time of year to give you color. Okay, next one. So what is a pollinator? Well, to be honest, they can be just about anything. Bees, butterflies, beetles, wasps, even people like us, and flies, hummingbirds. Oh yeah, hummingbirds are kind of accidental, right? They're in there going around. Bees, though, are the workhorse in this pollination game because they're actually out there for the pollen. Yeah. All right. So butterflies, probably the biggest, most charismatic thing out there, they are accidental pollinators. The adults feed on nectar, but the young need specific plants. As you can see in the bottom photo, top photo is of a giant swallowtail. The bottom photo is also a giant swallowtail. That little fake bird poop there is actually a beautiful caterpillar feeding on its host plant. That's on prickly ash. And so for me, just having something like prickly ash and learning that not every piece of bird poop I see is actually bird poop is pretty dang interesting. It's kind of fun. There are other caterpillars that mimic bird poop too. So it's a great way for them to avoid being eaten before they get to be an adult. Okay, monarchs, of course, everybody knows there are these host plants called milkweeds. We have lots of species of milkweeds in the US. And the nectar feeds not only the butterfly, the adult, but it's also bees will use that too. But the caterpillar can only feed on those plants while it's young. It can't use, if we don't have any milkweeds, we're not going to have any monarch butterflies. So it's a very important one from that aspect, just so that the monarchs can complete their life cycle. And then supporting birds. So nectar is, of course, really good for birds like hummingbirds, but the berries and the seeds that these plants produce are also very important. We have some birds that are very, very dependent on berries, like the bluebirds really love berries. They actually spread the berries from the asparagus all over my property. Which is fun to see them doing that and knowing that that's why asparagus comes up around my bluebird house. But they also need the insects for their young. So probably a lot of you have read Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home. But that book really kind of highlighted for everybody the importance of caterpillars to the life cycle of many birds. So by including native plants in our gardens, especially host plants, and making sure that we're allowing some of that foliage damage to happen, then we know that we're actually giving something back, not just to that insect who's eating the plant, but also to the bird that depends on those insects. So actions for birds also would be those window stickers, because window collisions are a big detriment to the populations of birds. And then we have this disrupted the migration of birds with the lights that we use, especially at night. All right, next one. So bees, as I said, they are actually pollen collectors, and this is an example, and they're collecting pollen for their young. They're going to go store that in a whatever kind of nesting habitat they use. So they're the real workhorses, and you can see this bee on a mountain mint. This is slender mountain mint. And the next one, and we'll talk just a little bit. A lot of people, when you hear bee, you think honeybee. Honeybees are not native bees. They are from Europe. So I kind of think of them as a domesticated animal, more like livestock. But we all love honey, and that's where it comes from. Most of our native bees are solitary bees. They do not form a hive or a colony. And they don't really store honey. What they do is they collect pollen into a ball and put that in whatever nesting habitat they use, and then they lay their egg on that. And that is how they are reproduced for the next year, whether their lifespan might be not that long. They might do this several times for whatever species. Every species is different. I am not an entomologist, by the way. I came upon all of this information just because I have native plants. And I love that about native plants, bringing me back to that wildlife management part. Okay, so I forgot to say that they're often specialists, these native bees, not often, but sometimes. And here's a picture of one. It looks like a bumblebee, but it's not. This is actually a hibiscus or a mallow bee. And these are males that are waiting for a female to come, because she will only use this hibiscus pollen. So you can think about generalists as opposed to specialist bees, as generalists can get pollen from anything, but this, like this bee right here, just wants hibiscus pollen. So if you thought this kind of illustrates it, like the generalist bees would be getting pollen from all over, and only if there were 10 plants, only 1/10 of that would be the right pollen to pollinate this hibiscus. And nesting habitat. So 30%, so you can see the stem that's on the left here. That is a pretty low growing plant, but it has evidence of something nesting in that stem. Some of our native bees are only as big as a grain of rice. They're tiny. And so they just need a tiny space, and they use these pithy stems to dig down and put their ball of pollen in there, and then they seal it off and they do it again. So you'll have like a row of little cells with little baby bees in there. And others will nest in the ground. So you can kind of almost see that next to that rock there is a hole. So there were bees all in here in this space, and there's mulch there, but the mulch is really light. So the bees can get down in there and dig their hole and nest in those spaces. And even though it's a solitary bee, there were several nests of the same species happening there. And the males, you'll watch in the spring, will patrol that area waiting for the females to hatch. So 70% are actually nesting in the ground. And so by minimizing mulch, you're really helping leave some of that bare soil that these ground nesting bees will need. So, and the way that I do it is I make sure I'm underplanting, I'm filling that space, especially back from the edge, with a lot of plants. So, but underneath there, it's all bare. It's bare soil underneath there, and the density of plants helps to shade that, so not very much else can grow in there. And this is what happens later in the year. You get these big plants, and that's a good thing. You want some height because that's kind of fun, but later in the season, things just get so dramatic in these gardens because they're big. And a lot of people ask me about how to keep those things from flopping. Well, some years you can really get a lot of flopping in these tall plants, especially in a windy habitat. And we use clipping a lot of times. So the gardens change throughout the season, and we concentrate on really kind of that diversity aspect of it, and making sure these taller plants are not right on the edge of our garden so that they're not going to interfere with people. Let's see. And then you guys have often heard, I know, leave the leaves. And that's because a lot of things use those leaves as nesting habitat and insulation. They need that, the kind of cover of those leaves for to keep the cold from killing them. So when we are thinking about what to do in the winter for these insects, a lot of what my thought is the more I can leave here, the longer I can leave it, the better I am providing habitat for these species. I still am going to do whatever I can to make this a tolerable space for me personally. As I look out here, I want to be able to see something that I still find pleasant. This happened after, this was an ice storm. So I only remove, what I have to that is close to the walkways, or maybe flopping over where I don't want it to. But I leave as much stalk as I can. So the next one is showing these are stalks and bundles of stalks. So when you cut that off, you want to leave, I leave as up to 2 feet of a stalk, but I just do it in an artful way, right? And then you can bundle that, and you can actually put that either horizontal or upright in a protected space, and that still provides more habitat. Let's see. Yeah, later in the spring. But don't forget those people spaces. We really, to keep these gardens successful, I think, really requires us thinking of them as gardens, not just a space where I've thrown a lot of seeds and everything can grow. We're trying to structure it, even though there's a lot of diversity in there. We're structuring it just like you would a regular garden, shorter things in the front, taller things in the back or in the middle. And an important aspect of all of this is a path for people. We want to be able to get in there, and the edges. You want to have really clean, maintained edges. And in this case, the way that I do that is with a trench along that. So I'm edging it just like you would any other lawn space, and I'm filling it with mulch, really thick mulch right there. And otherwise, I don't keep thick mulch in this garden, just on that edge. And seeing that mulch edge really, really helps us to interpret garden space. So there are a lot of resources out there, Xerxes, which we talked about, and the native plant nursery catalogs even can be really good. This is a old Prairie Moon nursery catalog page that really shows a lot of the host plants that you might need, what they help with. And then there are a lot of books that I use, like this one from Betsy Betros, which for our area is excellent for learning about butterflies. The Missouri Prairie Foundation, which I'd mentioned before, which is Grow Native program I'm a part of. The Kansas Native Plant Society, if you're in Kansas. Missouri has a Native Plant Society too. Missouri Botanical Garden, by the way, has a very, very good way for you to learn to pronounce the scientific names of plants. They have a plant finder, and if you look something up, especially by a scientific name, the Latin name, there's a little speaker, you can push it, and you will actually hear somebody say that word. So you'll kind of get used to how to pronounce those things. So that's my little cheat for the day of how to learn to pronounce these species names. Let's see, what do we have next here? Aha.
I think me.
Yeah, it's
I'm
Anna.
next.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, Patty.
tremendous-
That was awesome. I wish I had put a picture of my yard, which is all plants I got from Patty. So now that your yard and garden are optimized for wildlife and people, I have a couple different ways for you that you can use your yard for even more impact by contributing to science. So there is a surprising amount of scientific research going on right now that actually uses data submitted by people all over the world. And that's because scientists can't be everywhere all at once to collect the data. So they'll sometimes ask people to submit observations to add to their data sets. So something that might seem really simple, like here's this weird mushroom growing in my lawn, might actually be really important information to a researcher. So it's super easy to get involved in these sorts of projects, especially if your camera roll is already filled with pictures like these. And I know mine definitely is. I know Patty's is too. So in honor of fall and fall migration season, the first project I want to show you is called Journey North. So here's what its project page looks like on SciStarter. On the project page, on any project page, you can save it to your favorites when you're logged into your account. And the page has all the info and links you need to get started. So I'm going to walk you through this one. So I'll go ahead and click the blue visit button on the left. And that will add the project to my SciStarter dashboard. It'll keep track of all the projects I've participated in. And it'll take me to the Journey North website. So this citizen science project facilitates research on migration. So they've been collecting observations from the public since I think the 90s. And they work with a bunch of different species. They're probably most well known for their work with monarch butterflies. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Monarchs project. That will take me to a web page with information about the status of this year's monarch migration. And it will also have a detailed description of what kinds of information they're looking for in observations right now. There's a button here where I can submit my observations. So let's say I've seen a monarch this morning. I'm going to go ahead and click submit your observation. That will take me to their main observations form where I'll select monarch butterfly from the drop-down menu. And that takes me to a super easy form where I'll just put my location. I'll select monarch adult sighted, put in the date, one monarch, and I can upload a photo if I have one. Now there's a comments box, and this is actually really important. There's more instructions on what you should include in the comments back on that monarchs page. So that includes stuff like, was it just flying by, or did you see it visiting a flower, and things like that. So anytime you want to submit an observation to Journey North, you should check the main project page for instructions on what to put in the comments. So everyone's observations get all put together in a big data set that researchers can access. You can see this on the Journey North website, where you can also see maps of the current year and also past years' data. This can show you where monarchs or whatever species you're looking at, where they are in their migration for that season. I've definitely used the hummingbird map before to figure out when to put out and take in my hummingbird feeders. It's a really cool tool. And scientists really do use this data. Like here's just a small slice of reports that scientists have published on monarch butterflies using Journey North data just in the past couple of years. This is like 4 years of papers or something. They're really active in like using this data for research. Like I said, there's more than just monarchs on Journey North. There's about a dozen active projects, so do check out those other ones if you're interested. So that was just one citizen science project. I'm not going to walk through all of the examples, but I want to bring your attention to a couple other projects that are really cool. So a lot of projects will follow the same general format where you'll go to a website and submit your observation that way. Or a lot of them have an app as well. I think Journey North does not have an app. Don't quote me on that, I'm pretty sure. But a lot of other projects are based in a phone app. So here's another project that I really like. It's called Bud Burst. It's based out of the Chicago Botanic Garden. And they are more focused on looking at seasonal changes in plants. So this is only plants. And you can remember this one from the name Bud Burst. It's like, what time of year are the buds bursting into flowers? So they're interested in tracking seasonal changes within each year and looking year over year to see how those timing events are changing with climate change and just in general. So one of the active Bud Burst projects right now is called Phenology and Climate. So they're working on the research question, how is climate change affecting plant phenology? And phenology, again, is that timing of like when are different life cycle stages happening in the plants. This project is having a fall challenge right now, asking the question, what autumn changes do you notice in the plants in your neighborhood or schoolyard or community? So if you see things like leaves changing color, flowers finishing blooming, leaves dropping, they want your observations of those things so that they can look at year over year how the timing of those things are changing. Another project that's also interested in seasonal changes, but it's a little different setup, is called Nature's Notebook. So whereas Bud Burst, you can submit observations of different things, and you can just do Bud Burst like one time and then be done. Nature's Notebook specifically encourages you to do repeat observations of the same plants. So jumping over to the Nature's Notebook site, they also have campaigns. A lot of projects, citizen science projects, will have these like sub projects where they're looking for something more specific with your observations. So the most active project right now, since it is fall, is the Nectar Connectors project under Nature's Notebooks. A lot of these other ones are kind of spring focused, like the Green Wave one on the left is interested in when trees leaf out in the spring. But if you want to do something right now, Nature Connectors is a good place, Nectar Connectors is a good place. So if you still have flowers blooming in your yard, that's a great one to participate in. So when you join this campaign, they ask you to just check on specific plants every 2 to 4 weeks. And they'll tell you, they have a long list of plants that they're interested in. These are a lot of native plants that are good for pollinators. So if you are putting all of Patti's suggestions into practice, you should have a yard that's a good contender for Nectar Connectors. And they'll reach out to you every couple of weeks. They'll tell you the results that they have so far, tips for observation, things like that. And you can see on this slide, they have already collected 3 million observations this year, and their goal is to get to 4 million observations. So if you want to help them reach that awesome goal, check out Nature's Notebook. Just a few more I want to mention. I See Change is a project that's more open-ended. This is a great one, especially for people who have lived in the same place for a long time and have just witnessed changes due to climate change, or just suspected due to climate change. I guess you don't need to know that it's directly tied. And their project is it's really open-ended. You can just submit your observation, like, here's what I'm seeing that's different from what it used to be. And they collect all of these observations from people all over, and climate scientists have access to that. Quest-A-Game is one to keep in mind if you have kids. This is a fun one for kids. All ages can do it. It's really fun. But this is a more gamified app where you're getting points for your different observations of different species. You can make a team with other people who are also playing the game. You can compete against other teams. This is a fun one to do with like scout troops, classrooms, things like that. Seek by iNaturalist is sort of a generalist observation app where you can just snap a photo of anything you see, plant, animal, whatever. It will help you identify it. This one is also rather kid-friendly, but anybody can use it. And if you do want to share your observations with scientists, you do have to change it in the settings. Make sure you have that flipped on, that you'll share your observations with iNaturalist. And last but not least, iNaturalist. This is the one I've personally used the most. When I first moved into my new house, I set out to catalog every single thing that I found. So this is just any observation of any living thing, anytime, can go into this database. It's also very widely used by ecologists for research. The one thing to note is they are most interested in naturally occurring organisms. So if you do snap a photo of something that you planted, make sure you check, there's a box that you check that says like, this is captive or cultivated is the note to make. So anyway, iNaturalist is really fun. Also, there was a past SciStarter live event where we talked all about iNaturalist and how you can take better photos for this in really any citizen science project where you're sending photos that will be identified to species. We had a live event that talked all about like how to take better photos for those, and we'll drop a link to that in the chat as well. Okay, I want to make sure we can ask Patti some questions. I guess you can ask me questions, but Patti's more fun. We have a couple minutes and a couple questions in the Q&A. Patti, I want to leave seeds for birds, but my asters take over. Help.
Well, I think I would split the difference. I'd take some and leave some. That's what I would do if it were me. And I mean, I'll tell you what, I have that really big problem with rosin weed, some of the silphiums, rosin weed, cup plant, compass plant, those kinds of things. They grow so easy from seed, and birds absolutely love them. But as we all know, birds are very messy eaters. So I need to be very careful about where I let those seeds kind of stay, because most of the silphiums are gigantic plants. So I don't worry too much about asters because I can pull them out pretty easy. But some of the silphiums are like a gigantic dandelion. You take off the top, you just, but it's still got a taproot and it's going to come right back. So I think it's really just up to you how much you want. I don't really have an answer. Birds are messy. I do like leaving seeds for them. I just try to make sure, if I'm leaving seeds, they're back from the edge. They're not where I'm going to have it fall into my paths very often. Best I can say.
I just dug up all my extra asters and made a hedgerow out of them along my
fence. There you go. Yeah. Use that abundance.
I have another question. I love this one. Do you think that possibly modifying these plants could make it easier for them to coexist in human spaces? And would it be ethical to do so?
Well, I think ethics is personal, right? Kind of. For me, like I said, I'm very much straight species, mostly because they're gorgeous just the way they are, and I kind of want them. I want to bring that wildness close so I can look at it whenever I want to. That's just me. I think that the horticulture industry, the genetic manipulation of plants is just what it is. I mean, we love pretty, we love interesting, we love different. But personally, I love it only because it's already there. It's more of an adventure for me to find it. But I do think, there are some plants that we want to have in our environment that are beautiful. but they're maybe really aggressive. I kind of point out some of our native sunflower species are very rhizomatous, right? I don't know of any cultivars that they've made that are not of that, but it'd be great if I could have more sunflowers in my garden that are not going to take over. So maybe I choose some that aren't as rhizomatous as that one. I don't know. So there's a lot of ways to look at that, but the ethics part of it, I think that's up to every single one of us to really kind of think about that. How do we feel? And how important is one as opposed to the other?
All right, we've got one more question and 2 minutes to answer it. When you were talking about thinking of the native environment before European settlers, do you think it would be a good idea to start trying to attract more native bees instead of non-native pollinators such as the European honeybee?
For me, it is. Yeah. I mean, my opinion is yes, the habitat that's lost is the native habitat of these native bees, and they in themselves, I don't know what all the connections are for every single organism out there, but the more I can support what's already here or what has historically been here, the more I'm making sure that's supported in the future, I think. So that's my logic behind that. Honeybees, I like honey just like everybody else. So I mean, it's like, do I want to have a cow in the backyard as opposed to bison? I don't know. I think, yes, we need to support our native bees. They are, for the most part, harmless to us. They will not hurt us or our buildings. But, you know, everyone's got an opinion. I think honeybees are good livestock, but boy, I had some beehives. They sting when you're not friendly to them the way they think you should be. So I don't know. It's up to you. Again, these are all such ethical questions. My opinion is yes, support native bees with native plants that are not altered.
Awesome. Thank you, Patti. I've got just a couple of quick announcements before everybody logs off. We have 2 more SciStarter Live events this month. The next one will be all about the new tool, Science Near Me, and how you can use it to find even more ways to engage with science. And then on Halloween, we are doing a super special costume event where the SciStarter team, myself included, will be exploring our homes and maybe our yards to find insects and spiders and other arthropods to submit to the project Never Home Alone. I'm very excited about that. SciStarter, of course, is more than just live events and project pages. We have also a podcast, a blog, an e-newsletter that I encourage you to check out, plus even more resources to find on the SciStarter website. And if you are ever stuck, please reach out to info@scistarter.org and someone on the team there will help you out. I also want to thank Patti one more time for joining us today. And if you are in Eastern Kansas or the greater Kansas City area, do check out Botanical Belonging. We will drop in the chat a link to their website and social pages and a place where you can sign up for the Botanical Belonging email list. Last but not least, we have a super quick survey about this event. We would love for you to fill out. It takes less than 2 minutes. Your feedback will help us make future events even better. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patti. We will see you all next time.
Thank you.